Hello, Mary.
Hi, Paulo. Thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you for coming here to São Paulo to be with us. I would like to start asking you a little bit about your education. Why did you decide to become what you are, and what was your path during your life?
It's been a long path, but I wanted to be a singer when I was very young. I was pretty obsessed with opera. I saw, my dad was a big fan, and so I remember watching and rewatching a video of Carmen from the Met in the 80s over and over again. And I started to do school plays and community plays, and I asked my parents if I could audition for the Met Children's Chorus when I was around 10. And so I did. I actually went into New York City and was a member of the Met Children's Chorus. So I got to experience opera up close. Wow. Which was really powerful.
Since 10 years old?
10 years old to 13.
That's great.
And so after that, I fell off. My love of opera subsided a little bit, and I got really into musical theater. And started to, instead of act, direct, because I got very excited by all of the technical theater elements. So the lights, the set, the costumes, the way you could tell a story with a group of people and not just by yourself. And in college, I started almost to exclusively direct plays. And after college, I went to École Jacques Lecoq in Paris, where I learned about stage movement and design, and dynamics of natural dynamics, elemental dynamics that can be put into your work. And then when I went back to New York, I started a theater company on the one hand, and on the other hand started assisting a director who was very involved in opera. And as I was working with him, I got more and more excited by the opportunities that opera affords for abstraction and for making things really feel modern and invented in the minute on stage or in the moment. So I also tremendously respected singers who were more athletic than the actors that I knew, and who had a technical brain. So the way we could work together was very different than working with actors would be.
That was your first big professional experience?
Was working actually working with Stephen Wadsworth at Juilliard on Falstaff was a big professional experience for me. And then since then, I worked with him for a couple more years. I associate directed the Ring cycle in Seattle, Die Walküre and Siegfried. And then
those are
the
huge
best,
jobs.
The best. They were. It was the most fun. And then since then, I've directed a lot of my own work. This summer, I'm directing La Bohème in Santa Fe at Santa Fe Opera. And I've directed all around the world. I've directed actually in Costa Rica, and I've directed in Taiwan, and a lot in the U.S., obviously.
That is great.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit about your theater company. You've mentioned you are doing avant-garde and this modern way of thinking drama today. What do you think is the role of opera nowadays? Is it dead?
You know, theater famously has been called the fabulous invalid for centuries, right? And I think opera, if theater is the fabulous invalid, opera is the magnificent invalid because it keeps coming back to life. But I don't think telling stories through music, through making music together, is ever going to be a thing that we get tired of. I think the real utility for opera is the idea of a bunch of people in shared space telling a story with the beginning, middle, and end through a piece of music. And sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's a continual story. It goes on. It's satyagraha or something like that. But I think that's a thing that humans have done since tribal days. You know, we've always done that, and I don't think we'll ever stop. I think the vibrations of the human voice can uniquely move an audience and connect an audience, because we all share that vulnerability of letting our emotions, or letting our ideas, or letting our truest desires free from us and speaking them aloud.
So how do you think it is possible to connect artists or the whole cast in the same vibration and not have them as soloists, but as a group of people trying to aim the same goal?
Well, I think it's really interesting because it's very much like an orchestra, right? So all of the singers study like solo instrumentalists. And then you bring them all into a room, and you have to make something together where everybody's listening and responding.
And it's not only the voice, it's
And
also
it's not only the voice,
acting.
it's the body, it's the heart, it's the mind, it's all of those things. So for me, what's really useful is a little bit of time at the beginning of the rehearsal period to start to work together, maybe not even on the show that we're working on, but on something else that's different, that's maybe more abstract, that's more personal in some ways, so that people can reveal who they really are before we start to work on something that's kind of outside of ourselves.
Interesting, it's to make a connection between all of them.
Because I think that's the part that's often missing. When it doesn't work, it's because no one's taken the time to listen. Yeah. And the personal, I mean, it sounds very cliche, but the personal is universal. And if we take the time to really listen to each other and respect each other in that way, we will be able to create something so much more beautiful together.
And do you think that nowadays it's only possible to have modern stories, or is it possible to have the Baroque repertoire, the classic repertoire, significant again? What's the challenge?
I have to believe that you can tell those stories just because a significant amount of my work is in retelling those stories. But I think the challenges are that some of the social conventions, particularly like misogyny or racism or those kinds of discounting certain people in society because of who they are or what kind of person they are, is classism. Is a real challenge when you address those texts. Like Madame Butterfly is a really hard opera to direct. I never want to direct it because I don't feel like I particularly have anything to say about it, and I don't necessarily feel like it has anything to say about Japanese-ness, what that really is. So I think there are stories, though, that like the Magic Flute, or like Eugene Onegin, or like, although there's, parts of the Magic Flute, Monostatos, and the idea of casting him as the bad guy because he has darker skin is really problematic. So the directors who take on these stories have to be really prepared to approach it with as much consciousness and as much sensitivity and creativity as possible.
And do you think the role women had in the stories, it's actually a challenge today?
Oh yeah, of course. Because they serve to move the plot forward for the men, and so they don't become they don't have a trajectory or an arc. But I do think, and I told the younger students this at MSP, you have to be the hero of your own story when you're on stage. And even the people the little parts, or the Barbarina, has to live each moment on stage as if she is the hero of the story she's telling about that moment. So I think that it's a challenge, but what's art without a challenge? Right? Yeah,
nothing
exactly. So I think it's a challenge that this generation of singers particularly is ready to handle.
And do you think that, what's the role of contemporary music and drama in this process of telling a story for the public today?
Well, I think it's necessary. I think not only to revisit old stories and make them new, but to add our own stories that feel very important to the operatic repertoire will keep opera from being irrelevant or misogynistic or racist or outdated in some way. This is a way we can combat those problems, is by making new work. And I really strongly believe that there are some composers who have a lot to say about it. About the state of humanity now.
Nowadays.
Yeah.
Because we're really living a different world from 100 years ago, 200 years ago. There are new challenges. And
there's new tragedies, actually. There's a lot of wonderful, funny things and super sad things that deserve to be treated like this.
And what do you think it's the role of an educator like you to prepare young singers to this new opera environment?
I think two things, and I told the class this today. I think an opera actor, a singing actor, needs to enter the room prepared to make a choice. Make a choice about your character, and then make another choice about your character, and make a third choice and a fourth choice, and let all the choices add up to a path for your character through the show. person B, Julia, moves.
Don't wait for
beginning,
the
middle,
director
and
to come to
and
you.
then together.
Their ideas are not going to be as interesting as
And
yours
then
are,
A,
and they're not going to be as well
beginning, middle, and
researched.
Wow, if you are director.
I am a director, yes, but I honestly think that if a singer comes to me with some ideas about the way they would like to portray a role, I will be so much more inclined to give that person the freedom to figure it out.
Okay.
Because I know that they're working to tell the story in a way that feels true to them.
Okay.
So that's number one thing as an educator. I think we need to prepare our young singers to make choices and to take initiative in a rehearsal room.
So improvisation takes a...
Improvisation, even risk-taking.
Risk-taking.
Failure.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. We
Yeah,
can't
I
do
get
enough
it.
of that. That's what rehearsal is really for. It's not to wait to be perfect. And it's not to be polished to be perfect. So that's number one thing. Number two thing, I think, is we can prepare the singers to have a conversation. I think that in a room, singers are not likely to come forward and say, well, I think this, or well, I believe this thing, or how about this? Have you considered this?
Or by
and
doing this,
that part of the rehearsal process where it is a conversation, a very juicy and delicious conversation where everybody has something to say, is not usually present in an opera room because people are too nervous or that they're wrong.
And do you think because opera environment that is mainly a vertical one doesn't help them to become more
Taking
open
initiative.
in taking initiative?
I think it really is true. I think that idea of hierarchy that's very strict. But the ironic thing is a lot of times the singers get hired way before the director does.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
there's another reverse hierarchy that also says rehearsal is not important. We're only going to pay you for the performances. So there's a lot of things that seem to not foster experiment. It's also so expensive as an art
Yeah,
form
yeah.
that to risk is a bigger financial deal than not.
So it is nice to work in a small theater companies.
Exactly, or in education
On
too,
education?
or in companies that trust you to take risks,
take risks.
that connect people. But more and more, I think, because there are fewer resources devoted to the arts.
Yeah.
I know that that's true. That's something Brazil and the
Yeah.
USA share.
Yeah.
That you have to use human resource, and that thing is precious. That's the thing that money can't buy, and that you can't do what we do without the connection, the human connection.
Yeah, it's fundamental. And do you think that this role that small companies have to experiment will eventually affect the mainstream somehow?
I think so. I think the mainstream, and you can see it actually in the programming at places like the Metropolitan
Yeah.
Opera, is more and more experimental and is
They are
more
doing
abstract.
different things in the...
Totally,
Yeah.
totally. And I think that the TV has actually helped a lot of, the public understand abstraction in a way that is not, shows like The Good Place or shows that deal in not realism or a frame really help people understand theater and understand doing something creative that isn't necessarily like a traditional. I don't even really know what traditional is anymore. I'm at that point in my career where I see a traditional production and it feels like somebody's grandma's attic, and it doesn't feel like this should be the tradition or this should be the ritual.
Okay.
You know?
And well, you have a lot of experience traveling around the world, and you've seen probably many students. So I'd like to ask a little bit about our students here in Brazil. How do you relate them with the rest of the world? Do you think Brazilians have something unique here? What's about our students in Brazil?
Well, I think after 4 days of working with them, I can honestly say that the open-heartedness and the curiosity with which they're approaching this work, and they throw themselves in with abandon and with full commitment. And so watching them do these exercises that I brought to them, which I do with my students in New York, I've done it with students all over the place. I've done it with students in Texas, and I did a workshop in Taiwan. These students have so much passion for what they do, and they are doing it with no fear of failure. Or if they are, they're really good at hiding it. But each one, particularly the younger students, I find, are open and flying free.
Full heart.
Full heart, full steam ahead, and connected to each other. We had this wonderful moment in class today where other students told one of the students, Julia, that she could open herself even more. She could be much more vulnerable in class. And she had come a long way. She had opened a lot. But to have her hear them say that, she almost started crying. She just breathed out, exhaled, and was like, okay, I can really do that. I really trust that I could do that on stage or in music.
That's powerful.
It was pretty powerful. It was wonderful.
Yeah. And do you think that, well, I've learned that you've been around, you went to the manifestation yesterday, and you know about the not only the political situation here in Brazil, but as you've seen there, a lot of young people there claiming for not the government not to cut our budget in scholarships and education. What do you think this environment in the whole world has to do with young people and how powerful they are to change things for the future?
I think you and I both hope that they can change everything and that they can really, through their strength, which they're going to need in the coming years to deal with us and all the older generations, and that they can connect with each other and make a global movement towards a place, the world becomes a place where freedom is the norm, and where people don't infringe on each other's rights, and where art making is endorsed and supported, and education is a human right.
Do you think the artists in general, they have a political role in this process?
You know, I think they'd have to. I don't think art is able to be nonpartisan anymore. I think you can't afford to do that, right? It's not.
You just have to go for it.
You just have to go for it, and you have to say something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, get off the stage.
Get off the stage.
Let somebody else do it.
And do you think that we can prepare them for that inside regular schools or art schools, or it's something they have to learn at the streets?
I mean, I think that, I don't know if you're the same as me, but I learned that from individual teachers within all sorts of schools that I went to.
And how they are committed to that.
And how they are committed to that, and how they pushed me towards that. And people who I came in contact with, also colleagues, pursuing that way. So I think that it's actually about hearing that all around you, and then at some point it takes.
Do you think it's connected with the risk that we were mentioning before?
Completely, don't you think?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
You have to take risks in your life, otherwise.
And we have to be, I really do believe that artists have to be the most free. We have to show people that you can be the most free.
Yeah.
So that the audience and the public goes, that's an example of being free. That's
we can
what it
go
feels
further,
like.
so people can believe they also
Can go.
Yeah. Perhaps my last question here would be, what kind of message do you think that you would like to give our students for the future? Because we work with students since they are 6 years old. They're coming to our program. This is our first level of music education, and then we stay with them until they are 25 and some even more. It's a long time they spend with us. So, and they share a lot with younger people, what they've been learning. But what kind of message do you think that it is important for them to keep in their hearts about the life in the artistic world, not only opera, but in this environment that we are always taking risks, but it's an environment of a lot of creativity, of a lot of passion. What do you want to say them to inspire them for the future?
First of all, they're very lucky to be with you for so long, because this is a really special program.
Thank you.
Everyone who is involved in it that I have come in contact with is a beautiful educator and a super smart and sensitive human being.
Thank you.
The thing that I think that they should always keep close to their hearts is you always need a reason to sing something, or you always need a reason to create art, and it has to come from inside of you. So if you're rushing ahead, if you're working to create a lot of art and you haven't thought yet about the reason that you're doing it specifically, take the time to think about why that is, what your personal connection is to it, so that you can really tell the truth.
That's powerful.
I think so. I think so.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Paulo. Thank you so much.
Thank you.